Imagine waking up, driving to the grocery store, and realizing that the cost of your morning coffee, your weekly groceries, and the gas in your car has effectively doubled overnight. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian thriller, but for anyone watching the global markets right now, it is the terrifying reality of March 2026. We are watching a geopolitical earthquake unfold in real time.
It really is a domino effect on a planetary scale. We are officially in week 5 of what the United States is calling Operation Epic Fury. And the name is certainly fitting, considering we have already seen over 11,000 strikes targeting military and nuclear infrastructure across Iran. But the bombs dropping in West Asia are sending economic shockwaves straight into the wallets of people thousands of miles away. It is a stark reminder that in our hyper-connected world, a localized conflict is never truly local.
Exactly. And I want to unpack how we got here so quickly, because the sheer velocity of this escalation is staggering. Everything traces back to that surprise strike on February 28th. That was the match in the powder keg. The assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei didn't just decapitate the Iranian leadership. It fundamentally rewrote the rules of engagement in the region.
It did. For decades, there was a sort of shadow war, a delicate, albeit violent, dance of proxy conflicts, cyber attacks, and covert operations. But the February 28th strike threw all of that out the window. The United States and Israel decided to bypass the proxies and strike directly at the heart of the establishment. The stated goal, of course, is to permanently dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities and essentially force a regime change through overwhelming, high-precision military force.
But here is the fascinating and perhaps terrifying disconnect. You listen to officials in Washington right now, and there is this prevailing narrative of optimism. They are suggesting that the primary war aims could be wrapped up in a matter of weeks. Yet, when you look at the reality on the ground, the rhetoric coming out of Tehran paints a completely different picture. They are digging in for a generational struggle.
That is the classic hubris of modern warfare, isn't it? The belief that superior technology guarantees a swift victory. Yes, the aerial and drone campaigns are devastatingly precise. But you cannot bomb a country into submission when its leadership views the conflict as an existential holy war. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has made it abundantly clear that they are not playing on a Western timeline. They are absorbing the blows and shifting the battlefield from the skies to the seas, and that brings us to the most critical choke point on the map.
The Strait of Hormuz. It is essentially the jugular vein of the global economy. For those who might not look at a map of the Persian Gulf every day, this is a narrow stretch of water that handles roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. And Iran hasn't just blocked it with warships. They have done something far more calculated.
It is a brilliant, albeit devastating, asymmetric strategy. They haven't completely mined the strait or shut it down in a way that invites a massive naval invasion. Instead, they have instituted what analysts are calling a toll booth system. They are maintaining a soft closure, granting passage only on their incredibly strict terms. But the true genius of this move, the part that is keeping economists awake at night, is the currency they are demanding for that passage.
They are demanding payment in Chinese yuan. When I first read that detail, it felt like a paradigm shift. It is not just about squeezing the oil supply. It is a direct, calculated dagger aimed at the petrodollar system.
Precisely. Imagine setting up a barricade on the only highway out of a major industrial city, but instead of just asking for cash to let the trucks through, you demand a currency that forces all the drivers to do business with your biggest geopolitical rival. By demanding yuan, Mojtaba Khamenei is weaponizing global finance. He is forcing international shipping companies, and by extension their governments, to bypass the US dollar. It is financial warfare disguised as a naval blockade.
And the markets are reacting exactly as you would expect when the world's most critical commodity is held hostage. We are seeing oil surge past $114 a barrel. We haven't seen numbers like this since the peak of the pandemic disruptions. But I think people often misunderstand what $114 oil actually means. It is not just that it costs more to fill up your SUV.
Not at all. Oil is the foundational ingredient of modern civilization. When the price of crude skyrockets, the cost of manufacturing skyrockets. Transportation networks freeze up. Tanker traffic in the Gulf has ground to a near total halt, but the most terrifying ripple effect is in agriculture. Modern farming relies heavily on petroleum-based fertilizers. When oil spikes, fertilizer spikes. When fertilizer spikes, global crop yields are threatened, and the cost of basic food staples goes through the roof.
It is a sobering thought. We are not just talking about a mild economic downturn or a temporary recession. If this Hormuz blockade continues, we are staring down the barrel of a global food crisis. It makes you question the true cost of Operation Epic Fury. The military planners might be celebrating the destruction of nuclear centrifuges, but what is the price of that victory if it plunges the developing world into famine and triggers a global economic collapse?
That is the ultimate paradox of the 21st century. We have reached a point where we can deploy hyper-advanced, trillion-dollar drone swarms and execute flawless cyber attacks to blind an enemy's radar. We have absolute technological supremacy in the air. Yet, all of that futuristic capability is currently being neutralized by a very ancient, very analog strategy: controlling a narrow, physical strip of water. You can hack a computer network, but you cannot hack a physical oil tanker sitting in the middle of a physical strait.
It really highlights the limits of military power. You can destroy infrastructure, but you cannot bomb geography. The geographic reality is that the Persian Gulf has drawn in not just the primary actors, but the entire neighborhood. The strikes have expanded. We are seeing the ripple effects hitting the UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. It is activating regional proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. The whole map is lighting up.
And that regional activation is exactly why the 2-week timeline proposed by Western officials feels so detached from reality. This is no longer just a surgical strike campaign against nuclear facilities. It is a sprawling, multi-front war of attrition. The Houthis alone have shown how effectively they can disrupt Red Sea shipping. Now, combine that with Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz, and you have a coordinated strangulation of global trade routes.
It is a strategy of exhaustion. They don't need to defeat the United States military in a pitched battle. They just need to make the economic pain so unbearable for the rest of the world that the international community turns against the campaign.
Exactly. It is a test of endurance. Who breaks first? Does Iran's military infrastructure collapse under the weight of 11,000 airstrikes? Or does the global economy collapse under the weight of $114 oil and shattered supply chains? History tells us that populations will tolerate military action right up until the moment they cannot afford to feed their families. Once the domestic economic pain becomes too acute, the political will to sustain a foreign war evaporates very quickly.
Which brings us back to the ordinary person walking through the grocery store, looking at the price of bread. It is fascinating how deeply interconnected our survival is to geopolitical decisions made in rooms thousands of miles away. A missile strikes a compound in Tehran, a new leader takes power, a toll booth is set up in a strait most people have never visited, and suddenly, a family in Europe or America has to choose between heating their home and buying groceries.
It is the ultimate butterfly effect. And it forces us to ask some very difficult, almost philosophical questions about the nature of global security. For decades, we have relied on the assumption that free trade and open oceans were permanent fixtures of the modern world. We assumed that the global energy market was too big to fail, too essential to be used as a weapon. This conflict is shattering that illusion. We are realizing that our entire modern way of life is built on an incredibly fragile foundation.
A foundation that rests on a 21-mile-wide stretch of water. It is a profound vulnerability. As we watch this fifth week of the conflict unfold, it seems the narrative is shifting from a story about military triumph to a story about economic survival. The bombs may stop dropping in a few weeks or a few months, but the restructuring of global power, the shift toward the yuan, the weaponization of trade routes, the realization of our own fragility that is going to echo for decades.
The dust will eventually settle in West Asia, but the world that emerges from that dust will look vastly different from the one we knew in February. The petrodollar has been challenged in a way we haven't seen since its inception. The geopolitical center of gravity is shifting. The real question isn't just when the war will end, but what kind of world will be left when the strait finally reopens.
That is the thought that will linger long after the headlines fade. Will we rebuild the same fragile systems, or are we witnessing the painful birth of an entirely new global order? The true cost of Operation Epic Fury is still being tallied, and unfortunately, we are all going to be paying the bill. We will keep tracking every shift, every strike, and every market tremor as this historic crisis continues to unfold.